got all this information from, I guess, records that I had collected from my great aunt Donna Batker. She did pretty much all of the legwork, if not for my uncle Jeff Batker. He had done a report back when he was in high school at Verona, and yeah, so I happen to have all this stuff already. I just had to compile it. I really didn't do that much work. But anyway, so I guess to start, my great-grandfather, George Batker, he was a blacksmith in Verona. So I was going to start with a little backstory about what a blacksmith does. So back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the blacksmith was a very important person. The craft took a lot of time and experience. He did everything from sharpening and fixing worn-out tools to mending sled runners and buggy wheels. Other various services like repairing cultivators, putting horseshoes on, fixing harnesses, making tools, and even making door hinges. By the late 1930s, blacksmithing began to decline due to the gasoline engine and the development of the iron and steel industry. One of the factors that contributed to the downfall of blacksmithing was the invention of the factory system. Nowadays, it's more of a lost art. So, I guess I'll go to the next slide.
Sorry, I go through slides down, but it doesn't work. It's pointing down the slide.
So, George Batker, my great-grandfather, was born on December 12th, 1890. We're not sure where. His birth certificate, it was filed in the 50s or 60s. So I guess someone had to go back and confirm, one of his brothers or sisters confirmed when his birthday was, so that's how we ended up getting his birth certificate. So he was the son of Wilhelm and Wilhelmina, or Minnie Batker. Wilhelm was born in Mecklenburg, Germany, and Minnie was also of German heritage, but she was born in Middleton, Wisconsin. He was one of 10 children. There were 6 boys and 4 girls. George was the second oldest son. There was Pauline, William, Dora, May, John, Walter, Edward, Albert, and Alma. So this is a more recent picture of the family. They lived on Batker Farm. There was 232 acres near where the present-day Quick Trip and Wisconsin Brewing Company was, by Highway 151 in County M. It was originally purchased as 80 acres in 1893, and then they added another 80 acres in 1895, and then there were another 72 acres in 1901. The family raised hogs, sheep, horse, and cattle. They also did some oak lumbering. The farm was rather larger than the average-sized farm, and as a result, the older brothers didn't get a high school education as they were needed on the farm, which was typical in those days. One of the stories that my grandpa Jim Batker used to talk about was, or one of his favorite tidbits was from some information we got from Walter Batker's autobiography, I think. They called it a leprosy house close to the farm, and Walter remembered going and just visiting the farm against his parents' will. It was long after the inhabitant had died, I believe. And let's see, while the inhabitants of that house was still living, one of the another local farmer, Charlie Hack, used to go and play cards with him, and incidentally, as noted in the story, never actually contracted leprosy. So, let's see, in 1906, George was confirmed at the St. Jacobus Lutheran Church, which happened to be the same day as the San Francisco earthquake occurred. I have a confirmation certificate for him from that church up here. It's kind of beat up, but I got it that way. Wilhelm Batker, George's father, was a member of the Verona School Board and a key figure in the building of what is now St. James Lutheran Church in 1908. And this is a picture that he is in, which is of the church congregation. So anyway. So in 8th grade, George dropped out of school to tend to the farm. His father, Wilhelm, died at age 61 in 1915. George was 25 at the time. George did not get drafted in World War I, as his father had died shortly before, and he needed to help tend to the farm with his mother. However, some of his brothers did get drafted into the war. He contracted influenza in 1920 after the war, which was essentially the Spanish flu. He recovered with a strengthened immune system. The farm was owned debt-free, so it's just a picture of Verona. The farm was owned debt-free, so the stock market crash in 1929 didn't as heavily affect the family, while a lot of other farms in the area were lost. So sometime between 1920 and 1930, George opened an auto garage behind what is the present Tuvalu coffee shop off of Main Street with his brothers, and worked there briefly before losing interest. Shortly thereafter, he opened his first blacksmith shop in the same location as the place Verona Plumbing and Glass now stands. So both of those pictures are kind of rough, but he worked 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. 6 days a week as a yearly routine. Blacksmithing was a very seasonal job, but he maintained this routine year-round. From spring to fall, he was busy sharpening plow lathes and sickles for hay. He often made house calls to visit farms and fit new horseshoes on horses. The Dane County farm even counted on him to repair all their large workhorses. The one picture is from inside the shop, and then the other one is a newspaper clipping from the Capital Times where he was on a float portraying a blacksmith, which he actually was. And
Is that him in that bottom picture? The bottom right?
yeah, with the overalls, he is that one. I'm not sure who the person is standing to his left. Grandma, you had said that you thought that was Grandpa or Grandpa Jim Batker? Okay. It might be him. I don't think it looks like him, but it might be. So maybe somebody else might know or recognize. George married Martha Cuney on January 18th, 1934, when he was 41 years old and she was 33. They were married in Dubuque, Iowa. I have no idea why they were in Dubuque, Iowa, but that is what the marriage certificate says. They were both Verona residents, though, so for whatever reason, they made a road trip. Later that year, my great aunt Donna Batker was born, and then they had a son, James, my grandpa Jim Batker, born in 1938. In 1945, he moved his trade over to the present day, or behind where the present day Postal Connections is. I knew that he moved his shop at one point, but I did not know that it was in that Quonset hut, which you happen, Jesse, you
From John.
informed me.
John Sher told me that, right, John? Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was, none of us were aware of that at all, and the fact that it's still there is it's very interesting, very cool. We've driven past it a million times and had no idea that that was part of our family's history. George was a member of the National Blacksmithing Association of America. He was for 30 years. He served on the Verona City Council for 10 years and also served as a volunteer fireman for numerous years. We have information that he saved a man from the Sugar River in Verona at one point. Not something that we've found any newspaper articles about, but apparently that also happened. So in later years, my grandfather, his son James, began working at the shop and assisting George with his daily tasks. As modern day technology progressed, it meant the end of many great eras, including that of the blacksmith. By the 60s, developments in the automobile industry practically eliminated the need for a blacksmith. Therefore, George ended up selling his shop in 1967. This newspaper clipping says that it was sold to George Grinstead. However, we also have information that it was sold to Art Wild. I am not sure which or how that came to be.
George Grinstead.
So anyway, he unfortunately died 2 years later in 1969. And let's see, Jeff was born, who, again, I got most of that information from a year before that, I believe, and then my mom was a year later. So again, this information has all been compiled long before I was aware of it. So if you see anything that needs to be corrected, please let me know. But yeah, that's about it.
Someone just said George Grinstead over there.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
So you don't have any history on when Art Wild or anybody else had the shop afterwards? Because there for a while, my grandpa worked there in the
Oh.
blacksmith shop.
Really?
Yeah, Chris Call.
Okay.
So you don't have any history on who else was there in the blacksmith shop after your grandpa's over?
All I have is this article. Otherwise, I don't know if you, maybe the photo from inside the shop.
Yeah, it
But-
had to be there for quite a while after he sold it. 'Cause
Okay.
I barely remember the shop
Okay.
in the early 1900s.
Being where P&G is now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
before they ever took it over, it was still a blacksmith shop for
yeah,
quite a while.
yeah.
I just remember my grandpa was there, and I don't know how long he was there, but I know he was in the blacksmith for a while,
Mhm.
and then he bought a farm, so.
Okay. Do you know when about, or like what year that would have
Say that
been?
again so we have it recorded. Who did you know was it? Who worked there?
It would have been in the early 1900s, like maybe 1930, around there.
Is when your
Well,
your
my grandpa was there, yeah.
What was his name?
Chris Call, yeah. Because I remember he was there for a while, but I have no idea how long.
well,
Or
we were trying to figure out just last night. Actually, we were looking at Ancestry.com at the old census records, and my great grandfather George's occupation in 1930 was in an auto garage, and it didn't say until the 1940 census that he was that he worked as a blacksmith. So I'm thinking sometime between 1930 and 1940 is when he actually bought the shop. So
It could be, yeah.
it might be that your grandfather worked there before it was sold to my grandfather or my great grandfather. I don't know who the previous owner was before him.
There's a recording that we have from Mrs. Lewis there. And she talks about the blacksmith shop and,
You start,
okay.
you carry the recorder.
There's a recording that Jesse found of Mrs. Lois Ann. She was Yvette's wife in town, is that correct?
Yeah.
And she lists various owners of the blacksmith shop after George's brother left and went to a livery stable. They started a livery stable. She talks about it. And so you might be able to get some sense of dates from that recording, right?
It's really fun. I was kind of hoping people would chime in too. We could fill in some of the holes. Here you go, John.
Well, I have to say I'm old enough to remember visiting George's blacksmith shop where the P&G or a plumbing and glass building is now.
Okay.
I remember very well farmers would bring horses in to be shod, and George would have to size them like a farrier would do today. He had his, I forget what the fire is called in a blacksmith shop anymore, but
Forge.
pardon?
Forge, John.
Forge. I was fairly young, but I lived on Main Street, so I was a Main Street pest, pretty much. And George kicked me out of the blacksmith shop more than once because he didn't want me to get hurt. And he was dealing with hot iron all the time, repairing things for farmers like you mentioned, wagon wheels, things like that, because an awfully lot of wagons were still coming to town. But I remember him shoeing horses quite a bit. And then I do remember when George moved his business next on North Franklin Street in that Quonset building. My in-laws lived right next door, and so I saw quite a bit of George there. And I have to say, he was one of the most gentle men that I ever recall. In fact, all the Batker family, I have to say this, they were first-class folks. And they were all very well-respected people. And George did serve on the school board. He was on the school board when I was in the Verona State Graded School, which is coming up on its big anniversary. And so for a man who worked as hard as he did, he contributed a lot more to the community as a school board member and as a village board member for a number of years. So that's what I recall. I do remember briefly where he moved over to where Ellis area is. It seemed to me for a short time, and then he went to the Quonset building down on North Franklin. And George Grimstead was the man who took over his business, as I recall it. And George Grimstead was in the business for a number of years before he retired and went to Lake, Wisconsin, I think. And that, I think, was pretty much the end of the activity in that building. There might have been one more owner that still did some work in that building, but since that time, it's been empty. Well, it's not empty, it's full of old cars right now. But that's my remembrance of the blacksmith shop, and I can remember it very well. So whatever that's worth.
Thanks, John.
Actually, if you wouldn't mind, does anyone else have any memories of? Oh, question. Yeah, we'll go there, then over here, then here. This is awesome. Oh, sorry, we go around this way. I'll come back.
One of the things up here said the Batker brothers,
Yes.
blacksmith. Who was the brother that was with him?
I think Albert.
Oh,
Yeah, the Wild, you mentioned the Wilds there.
Yeah.
Actually, George bought the blacksmith shop from Bill Wild.
Oh.
I'm Walter Batker's son.
Oh,
So I'm
you
the
are.
nephew, so
You know that I got a lot of information from
Yeah.
your dad too then.
Okay, yeah, that's some of the information. The other thing I have right here on the table is a plow lathe. You mentioned he sharpened plow lathes. This is a plow lathe that was sharpened and repointed by George Batker.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's,
And so he would have forged welded this new tip on here. And it belonged to the Kane family. And one of the Kane boys, well, Tom Kane, some of you know Tom, he told my son about it, and he said, I've got a plow lathe that your great uncle did. So it hangs in my son's shop now. It's rusty, it's old, but it's authentic. That's my contribution.
that's awesome.
Thank you for sharing, David. And by the way, all these, at some point, we're going to have a display space in Verona. It might be the pump house, maybe something else. So make sure none of this stuff gets lost, because these would make awesome little exhibits
Yeah,
about the
absolutely.
blacksmith shop. That's amazing. Someone want to add something? Sally, did you want to add something? Here you go.
I'm with Sally Manson. I live next door to Batker's. Our house was next door to Batker's. And Jim and I went to school together. We were born the same year, 1938. And I just remember going over there. I wasn't as brave as John, but I remember going over and sort of peeking in and watching him shoot the horses. And I just remember how hot it was in there. But like John said, he was such a gentle, kind man. And then my mother and Martha would always have to talk across the fence, so to speak. When I come out the back door, they would get real quiet. Didn't want me to hear what they were saying about. But Jim and I, grew up together. And so I remember the blacksmith shop. Well, wasn't the feed store next door?
Yeah.
Even back then? Yeah.
There was a feed store in that building,
Yes.
besides the blacksmith shop.
Yes, right. Okay.
He didn't have the whole building.
Right, right.
Was that maybe when Art Wild was there then? In the feed store? Yeah. 'Cause I
Could be.
don't think he was there when it was a black.
Ernie Feller was in the feed store before the war,
Oh, yeah.
and then he went to,
Can you say that again?
Ernie Feller, anybody remembers Ernie? He was a local character.
He's in the book down at the nest for $20 in the bed. $20 in the book, right, John? He's in the
Right,
book.
yeah. But Ernie got drafted, and then Palmer Peters had his feed store in there. But Palmer eventually got into the milk cooling business as well, and that building wasn't big enough for him. So, but when Ernie came back from service, he wanted to go back into that building, but it was already occupied, and for some reason he didn't make. And he ended up in a building across the street. You probably remember in that old building that was near the depot, train depot. So I just to point out that George didn't have the whole building. There was a great wall between the two businesses. And then after that, that wall was taken out, and now Plumbing and Glass has the whole building.
Was he on the left side or the right side if you're facing from the street, George?
He was on the left side, nearest his house.
What year did Plumbing and Glass move in there?
I don't know when Plumbing and Glass moved in there. And in the basement of that building, by the way, there was a man that made cement blocks one by one with a form, mixing the cement, and he made the cement blocks down there. I remember being down there too.
Anyone else have any memories of the Backers or the blacksmith shop? This is pretty awesome.
Do we know,
Yeah.
Jesse, when that building was built?
Oh, do we know when the building was built? I mean,
How old is that building?
gosh, I
How
looked this up
old is
once.
that plumbing and glass?
How old is Plumbing and Glass?
before my time.
I don't think it predates 1900, because I looked it up once, I was trying to figure out how many 1800s buildings we still had, and I think it was real close to 1900, but I'd have to look.
I don't know.
Yeah, good question.
We said that the building, there was other people in it before my great-grandfather George? There was, okay. Because I had read something at one point that he built his shop but that may have been a different one, or that may just not be correct at all. But, yeah, I thought, and I also thought that it's not the same building as the one that my great-grandfather was in, but the foundation is the same.
Oh, I think everyone, it's the same building, right?
It's the same
Plumbing
building, I
glass?
think.
It is, okay, so it was never,
Yeah, I think it's the same building. I don't recall that it was added onto or anything like that.
okay.
But
I don't think it was either.
it'd have to be somebody older than I am to tell you about
All
that.
right. Well, it's good to know, it's all new information, and it's better than what I have. It's better than any memory I have anyway, that's for sure. I was just gonna say, Sally Mass, right? So my great aunt Donna's old photograph, or photo albums that she put together, and she writes, who's in each picture in at least one of the books. And I know that there's some of the Matt's family. I don't know if it's you or if it's someone else, but you might find some interesting pictures in there.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. This was really fun. Thank you. All right, and everyone come up.